More localized loopery. The secluded mini and micro velodromes of Shoreham's free-to-air fitness mecca for certified gymphobics played a prominent role within the initial phase of this arbitrarily constructed squigglefest until a combination of parked pinch points and late arriving 9-to-5ers threw me off my steady stroke, and made it impossible to maintain the circuit's racing line. Cadences, contortions, and any other pivotal variable relating to effort were heavily influenced by the crepuscular chill of a brisk onshore breeze, which on this occasion lay beyond the computational capacities of our climate clairvoyants to detect, despite making its invisible presence felt by the rattle bones of thin-skinned mortals. Thus, this 45-minute postural pick-and-mix impulsively played out as unseated star strides during numerous northbound intervals, merged with seated breathers whilst soft-pedalling towards the beach, where a verdant wilderness still flourished from fertile shingle meadows, defying this florally destructive summer's infernal finale. To the morrow. And 12 full laps of an antique carriage clock's long hand later, neither conditions nor my diminished appetite for adventure had altered one iota. The result? An embellished encore of yesterday's homespun sabbatical from housebound chores, yielding subconscious levels of exertion that would be most aptly described as manageably masochistic, but at no point drifted to within perceived proximity of an oxygen death spiral. By the reckoning of any wearable smart device whose optical senses had been accurately calibrated to monitor cardiological events, these visceral endeavours would have likely been verified as a tough tempo hour, averaging at roughly 70% of my lactic limits, and for 180 watts of Strava guesstimated power. On any qualified cycling coach's dually zone-based training scale, and according to my somewhat flexible FTP, the aforementioned stats could be colourfully interpreted as mean green bang for mellow yellow beats, or in layman's language, a higher heart rate than would typically be required to attain and sustain this specific wattage. This mismatch of metrics, also known as a zonal disparity, is a partial consequence of Strava's ongoing inability to account for elemental resistance when calculating a rider's power output, which the platform continues to derive exclusively from their velocity whilst travelling across an indefinite range of positive and negative gradients. Hence, in exceptionally turbulent weather, no compensatory boost is awarded for grinding out your lungs into that brutal block headwind. Instead, all estimated readings during such periods will be conservative, thereby reducing one's overall average. If variety is the spice of life, then let consistency be its starchy staple. More shamelessly plagiarized and paraphrased proverbs, dug up from the not-too-distant past, for responsible recycling during times when motivation remains in scarcer supply than, for example, unshelled cashew nuts, organic muesli with a greater ratio of sustainably rolled jumbo oat flakes than dehydrated forest fruit, and a certain jet-black stout, famous for the saintly patience required before its consumer is permitted to savour the first sip of a perfectly hand-pulled pint, and which many of Britain's most prominent high-street supermarkets now refuse to sell in single cans. Suffice it to state that this parentally assigned mission to hand forage a texted manifest of the above items and several other non-essential must-haves was sandwiched between moderately active domestic duties and archived episodes of Gordon Ramsay's Boiling Point. This short-running documentary series was the foul-mouthed culinary artist's maiden venture on mainstream television, and chronicled his endeavour to emulate the then unprecedented feat of his mentor Marco Pierre White, by becoming only the second British chef to procure 3 priceless Michelin stars and an adequate personal hygiene rating. In a literal contradiction to this ride's metaphorical title, the series' opening instalment featured no complex carb-based dishes, since any long, short, wide, narrow, or whole grain rice, alongside remotely mass-harvested Maris Piper potatoes, were upstaged by Bramley's cooking apples, whose senior representatives provided both their prestigious brand's official endorsement of Mr. Ramsay's restaurant business, together with a substantial financial contribution. During a subsequent scene illustrating a recipe for apple turnovers, Gordon surreptitiously supplanted his benefactor's forbidden fruits for Granny Smith's juicier alternatives.